I think just really focus on your mindset and observe what you're telling yourself. I remember back then when I was working at Apple, I kept telling myself, I'm so stressed out, I'm so tired, I can't wait for this time to be over. And I kept having those negative thoughts, and it was also like manifesting obviously in my life. And the more I told myself I don't have time, the more stressed I felt about the time. So I think stepping into the last weeks of the year, it's really important to be mindful about the things you're telling yourself. So instead of telling yourself, I'm stressed out, I don't have time, tell yourself, I always have time for the things that are important for me.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hello, Savannah family. Welcome back. I'm so excited today to be doing an episode all about the holiday season. It's supposed to be a blissful time, but I know it's stressful for so many of us. We're traveling, we're visiting family, and if you are feeling a little bit stressed out by the rapidly approaching, I can't believe it's December, holiday season, we are going to continue our conversation with Martina Fink. I talked to her in Tuesday's episode about the throat chakra and the sacral chakra, and she's going to tell us how we can stay grounded and blissful and balanced during this important time of the year. We're going to talk about which chakras we want to focus on during this holiday period, how to best schedule our time, give and receive gifts, and of course, how we can make time for self-care. And Martina's going to share a really great mindset hack, for a happy holiday season. Before we dive in, I just wanted to remind you that you can do a lot of holiday shopping on SavannahSpirit.com. Without them, this podcast would not be possible. And I also wanted to remind you that Savannah Spirit and I are teaming up to co-host a really incredible experience that's going to kick off on January 1st that's completely free. I am leading an elemental chakra yoga series. All of these classes are 20 minutes, so you're going to be able to hack the ancient wisdom of the chakras into your day-to-day life and routine with these 20-minute yoga classes. I've designed these classes around the lower 4 chakras, so you can choose to motivate and kind of kickstart your day and your energy with the fire classes, which are of course Manipura chakra, gain clarity and inspiration by exploring the water element, the sacral chakra classes. You can de-stress and combat anxiety by connecting with Mother Earth. That would be the root chakra classes. Or you can choose to expand your capacity for love in the air classes. Those are designed to really help you slow down and connect with your deepest intentions. This is a little 14-day challenge that I've put together with Savannah Spirit. The videos are so beautiful, and I can't wait to share them with you on January 1st. I want to make sure you get them and receive them, and all you have to do is sign up. Let me know you want them, and they will get sent to you on January 1st. BrettLarkin.com/elemental is where you want to go, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. All right, now let's learn about how we're going to stay sane until January 1st with Martina. Hi, Martina. Welcome back to the show.
Hi.
Glad to have you here. And I know today we wanted to talk a little bit about how to have a glowing and blissful holiday season, because I think we all go into the holiday season with that intention, but it ends up often being the most stressful time of year for so many of us. So what's your take on what's kind of energetically going on as we enter the holidays?
Yeah, it's actually a really crazy time of the year, I want to say. And I'm also sharing my learnings with you from what I've experienced in the last few years. I used to be a store manager at Apple. And if you've ever been to an Apple store in December, it's crazy.
I can't even imagine. Terrifying. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah. And our store was actually a really small one. And I think on Saturdays in the holiday season, there were probably like 4,000 or 5,000 people coming in every day. And so I've been there in those stressful holiday months, and it's really not a fun place to be sometimes. And it can get really overwhelming with, social events and family parties and all these other things that you want to do. And not even to mention all the Christmas gifts people want to get for their loved ones and their friends. So there is so many things that we want to do in this 1 month or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on when the holidays really start, depending on where you live. But I think there's a couple of things that you can do to prepare for this busy time and to make sure that you protect your own energy, because in the end, you are the only person who can protect your own energy. Other people are just going to influence you. And if you don't know necessarily how to make sure that you keep your energy high, then it's really going to affect you. And that's where I used to be too. So I think probably the most important thing, and if we connect that to the chakras again, is solar plexus and heart chakra, to really make sure that you recharge your own energy on a regular basis. So, there's this saying where if only we charged ourselves as much as we charged our iPhones or our phones.
Bringing it back to the Apple store, your time at the Apple store.
Yes. Exactly. So this is what we should do. We should recharge ourselves as much as we charge our phones. And that's really going to help you feel energized throughout the holiday season as well.
And what does that recharging process look like for you, or what advice do you give your clients? Because some people just don't know where to begin. It's like, does that look like hustling to a yoga class? Does it look like taking a bath? Is it all of the above? I mean, how can people sort of get in touch with what will be recharging them? And that's also sort of like feasible, because we're all so busy during this time.
Yeah. So what I recommend is that you create your own self-love menu. And that's like a list of things that bring you joy and that make you feel good. And that can be, like you said, going to a yoga class, taking a bath, sleeping in on the weekend, having a cup of tea while reading a book, or going to your favorite cafe, or going to the spa. It doesn't really matter what it is, but I think it would be really helpful if you had a list of things that are going to make you feel good. So then during the holiday season, you can time block in your calendar. If you once a week you do like a 1 hour something, or and then just once you have that, let's say on Saturday you want to do something. So on Saturday morning you look at your list and you're like, okay, today I feel like going to my favorite cafe, reading a book, or with my journal. And then you do that. And I think that's really helpful. I do think that time blocking is so important for that. So I don't recommend you just go into the holidays and then you're like, oh, it's Saturday. Oh, I need to wash my clothes and get groceries and feel overwhelmed that way. But I think you really have to kind of make those times in your calendar as well to make sure you don't forget about it, because it's so easy to forget that time when we have so much going on.
So tell me a little bit more. I love the word you use, time blocking. How do you use this or advise clients to use this in their life? I'm assuming you're kind of just talking about time management, but is there some tips or techniques that you want to share with us around that?
Yeah, I've actually been really crazy on time blocking in my calendar. I use my calendar for everything. So not just work, also private stuff. I block some evenings off during the week where I don't work. I don't take any clients, don't do any meetings. I usually don't go out to meet with friends from Monday to Thursday and then just meet friends Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, just because I noticed I am way more productive and I feel much more focused when I have the first 4 days of the week to myself. And that has worked really well for me. And I think when I work with my clients, I really encourage them to listen to their own intuition and help them understand what makes them feel good. What is the right time for them to take time off, or time to meet with friends and go out. And that's been really probably the biggest learning for all of my clients, is to really learn to understand what their bodies are telling them and what really feels good for them.
So I'm curious, because you mentioned, it's so funny, right? Because I feel like so much of, yoga and the chakras and meditation, it's like teaching us to be in the present moment and be able to go with the flow. But at the same time, it's like, no, actually we need to schedule everything in our day. And like, I was just visualizing, like, you know, you're talking about a calendar that has everything for work and everything personal. And I think it's like, that's needed, right? Just because life has gotten so busy, like sometimes if you don't go sort of the scheduling route, it's just not going to happen. Do you have like a tool that you use? I'm just curious, like, do you kind of schedule out everything on paper and pen, or do you have like a digital calendar that you're using? Is it like a Google Calendar, or is it a book? Like, how does it actually look in your physical world?
Yeah, it's just my iCal on my Mac, which synchronizes with my phone. So whenever I add an appointment, it's always everywhere on all my devices, which is so easy. And you can always change things. And I have everything scheduled in, from simple tasks like checking my emails, usually 30 minutes a day, checking in with my clients, 30 minutes a day, being on social media, 30 minutes to 1 hour, depending on what I have going on in my business. And, you know, it's like you said, it's so important to have time scheduled, because if not, we're getting lost on social media, and like we end up scrolling for an hour, forgetting what we really wanted to look at and things like that, which just distract us from being productive. So I know not everyone is organized like me and you probably, but you have to kind of find out what works for you again. But that has really worked so well for me. And I've been so efficient and so productive with this kind of strategy to just plan out not every single moment, but anywhere from like 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. is usually pretty scheduled, including the lunch break, because I definitely used to forget the lunch breaks because I was so into like working and into totally in my element in the beginning.
Yeah. Do you have ever like blocks of time that are like scheduled that are like, don't work, like scheduled free time?
Yeah, I usually don't work on Fridays, which has kind of become my day off, and a day where I'm really also forcing myself to go into town and meet with a friend for breakfast or lunch, and then here and there do like a spa treatment or a facial or a massage or get my hair done. And that has felt really good to just have my Fridays to myself mostly.
Yeah. Yeah. This idea of scheduling in the self-care is really so important. I think it's a lesson that I'm learning as well. I think let's bring it back to this time of year specifically, because I know we talked about solar plexus chakra and heart chakra. So heart chakra, I'm feeling, is like all this self-care work we're talking about. So, you know, making sure to balance and have time for this self-care, which I think gets additionally difficult and stressful for people with the holidays, because travel, right? So it's like you're already out of your normal routine, or maybe like the normal thing you might do. You know, travel is just so disruptive. I mean, for me, I've found that I travel a lot less than I used to. I know some people love it, but it's hard on your system physically and whatnot. And then also seeing family is joyous for many people, but it also brings up, like we talked about in our last episode, like we have so many subconscious stories and patterns that get re-triggered or activated when we're around our parents or our siblings, right? Like I know I have people in my uplifted group that are like me, and like they tell me that suddenly they're like acting like a teenager again, right? Just because they're in their parents' house. So what advice do you have for folks around this? Like the fact that during this time we're also traveling, and then we're also maybe just being like triggered by past relationships and kind of like family stuff that might be going on.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because I think whenever we go back into old habits or old environments, we're just instantly back in our past. And that's a difficult part when you work on yourself and you heal stuff. That's like the test when you go back to your past environments and you notice, oh, I'm actually just falling back into old patterns and I don't want that. So I think the most important thing is that you have to be really loving and gentle with yourself. So the worst thing you can do is like beat yourself up for that and be angry at yourself because you've fallen back into old patterns, or, you know, all of that stuff. When we just act like a different person, it doesn't help when we get angry at ourselves and beat ourselves up. It doesn't make us feel more happy or glowing in that moment. So the best thing I think you can do is just really observe what's going on and then be loving with yourself and say, okay, well, that probably hasn't healed properly yet, or I still need to work on that. And that's a lesson, and then move on.
I know we talked about in the last episode, like how to know which chakra you need to work on. And it's like, just go spend the holidays with your family and do a bunch of stressful traveling. And probably, you know, like what you might need to work on will instantly reveal itself to you just based on like your reactions and like what ends up stressing you out. Which is kind of an interesting tip, because I think what we're saying is like you can use the holiday time and the additional burden of stress or being with family like as a container. If you can like detach from it a little bit and not engage, you can actually see it as this really interesting, almost like laboratory of where some of your tendencies are going to play out, because our habitual unconscious tendencies are always going to play out when we're in a period of stress. Like that's when they emerge. And if we use that as an opportunity to notice, and I think doing some journaling, I bet you'd agree with me, would be a great idea during that time, it could really benefit.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think it's also really important to say no sometimes. So that's also something that I'm learning, that I have to say no to things that are draining. And if you have 10 different parties coming up, maybe you cannot go to all the 10, and you just choose those that really fulfill you, or that you feel, you know, sometimes we need to compromise and go to stuff we're not 100% excited about, but maybe don't say yes to everything if you already know that you would rather want to say no. And that's, again, a throat chakra thing, right? So like sometimes we need to kind of feel into, where do I compromise and I'm okay with like going and being loving with myself if something comes up, and where would I just rather really not go and say no, but then say yes to myself. Because really, you know, we have to make sure that whenever we say yes to someone else or something, that we also say yes to ourselves.
It's such a good reminder. I think all of us, so often we act or we do things unconsciously out of obligation, and that rears its ugly head like more than ever during the holiday time, right? Because it's like, well, we always go to like so-and-so's, or, you know, every Christmas we do XYZ. And, you know, it can be scary, but if you're looking to do something else or looking to practice a little more autonomy or self-care, you know, this period can be a time where you can kind of see like what traditions and things that, you know, always happen are working for me and which aren't, and how do I kind of break those patterns or make some shifts.
Yeah. And, you know, I think if you're going to an event you don't really want to go, it's not just that it's taking up your time that you could spend differently. It can actually be really draining for your energy. So like, imagine your solar plexus is just getting deflated or like completely depleted as you go to an event where that is draining. So after that, you will probably have to recharge your internal phone even more than if you just went to something else or just stayed at home and did something for yourself.
Yeah, so true. I don't think we can leave the topic of the holidays without touching a little bit on gifts and gift giving and also gift receiving. I'm curious if there's kind of some yogic wisdom that you want to share with us around any of this, or advice that you've given your clients, either about how to really receive, or even just like what kinds of gifts or kinds of things you think are like exciting for this holiday season.
Such a good question. I think, and this probably goes back to the heart chakra, that we have to have the balance of giving and receiving. So, you know, sometimes I have clients who make gifts for everyone, and like the cousin of the cousin and the uncle of their mom and you know, like everyone. And while that is really nice, I don't think we should be giving gifts when they don't really come from our heart. So I think, you know, I think the most beautiful gifts are the ones that you truly want to make and that feel so exciting and so good in your heart when you make a gift to this person. So if you feel like you don't really want to gift certain people something because they're not important to you, they're not important people to you at this stage in your life, or you don't think they will appreciate it, I don't think it makes sense to really invest so much time and money and energy into finding something for someone that you don't really think is going to appreciate you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think just kind of like we talked earlier about unconsciousness and obligation, I feel like a lot of times a lot of gift giving becomes very, like it just feels like obligatory or transactional somehow, you know? And I'm just curious, like, how we can approach those kind of relationships in a different way. Like, I think a lot of it can even just be with expectation setting, like letting people know, like, I really don't want to receive gifts this year. If you were thinking of me, maybe donate to this charity I care about or something like that. And I don't know, like, if you say or do something like that, it's sort of setting up the person to also understand that, maybe you're not that into, I know some people love like giving and receiving trinkets, but I know for like me and my husband, we find it really stressful. Like, we're like extreme minimalists. Like, we hate receiving packages. We hate stuff. So again, I think there's just like some expectation setting we can all do like early on to let people know about kind of how we want to receive.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do things, and just be really clear up front. And I think also the best gifts that you can make is time. So maybe going for dinner with your friends, or inviting them to go to the spa with you, or like really spending time together, which is priceless. You cannot really put a price tag on, spending a beautiful afternoon with your best friend or your family. So those have been the gifts that I enjoyed giving the most, but then also enjoy receiving the most, because you feel like you're actually getting time from someone versus just a gift that is, useless or you don't need. Like, I totally agree with you on like living minimalist lifestyles and getting as little clutter and stuff as possible, because it's just going to produce so much more waste in this world that we don't need.
Yeah, no, I love that idea of being the person to be like, I'm going to host a dinner. I'm going to, treat everyone to XYZ, class or weekend retreat or, whatever it may be. Martina, it's been really fun to pick your brain on all of this. Do you have any other last tips for a glowing and blissful holiday season that you want to share with us before we lose you?
Yeah, I think just really focus on your mindset and observe what you're telling yourself. I remember back then when I was working at Apple, I kept telling myself, I'm so stressed out, I'm so tired, I can't wait for this time to be over. And I kept having those negative thoughts, and it was also like manifesting obviously in my life. And the more I told myself I don't have time, the more stressed I felt about the time. So I think stepping into this, the last years of the week, the last weeks of the year, it's really important to be mindful about the things you're telling yourself. So instead of telling yourself, I'm stressed out, I don't have time, tell yourself, I always have time for the things that are important for me. Or I always take time for myself, or I love myself, I appreciate myself. Things like that are just encouraging and positive versus just letting the negative self-talk take over.
Right. Yeah. Like I choose to travel and see family during the holidays, right? Like I love, decorating or cooking for my family or, whatever it is. Yeah. I think that is so true, because we do all have this like autopilot language. We all love to complain, right? Like, not us, but like that voice inside our head that dominates, if we don't bring awareness to it, is always going to find the negative in everything and just kind of moan about it. Yeah. So I think, whether it's yoga or journaling or just, kind of having an extra awareness as we head into this month of festivities is such a great tip. Martina, it's been so fun to connect with you this week. Before we let you go, how can people stay in touch with you? What's the best way for listeners to connect with you if they want to learn a little bit more about you and your work, or they happen to be in your part of the world?
Yes, come visit me in Zurich. You can find me on Instagram at Martina Glows, and my website is martinafink.com. And I also have a podcast called the Glow Life Podcast, and it's available on iTunes and everywhere else where you can find podcasts.
Amazing. So I'll link all of that below. Savannah family, let me know. Are you excited about the holidays? Stressed? Did this podcast give you some ideas? I really love Martina's idea of really focusing on our third and fourth chakra during this time, and especially charging up that fourth chakra with so much love, hopefully for yourself with that, self-service love menu, self-love menu she talked about, and then also in all the beautiful gifts or experiences we choose to share with our family and loved ones. Thank you so much for being here, and I am sending you lots of holiday love from my heart to yours. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.